Anthony, back to Solanke! The birthday boy gets a birthday goal. And Dominic Solanke just can't stop finding the back of the net. Energy into their forward play. Little link up with Billy, that's nice. And now David Brooks into the box. Shoots in the back of the net, David Brooks. It was Solanke, in fact, with the link up, and David Brooks fired it across sandbar.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Cherries Red Army. I'm Kirk, and it's midweek football again for the Cherries. We're going for 3 wins in a row as we travel to the Hawthorns tomorrow to try and get another 3 points towards promotion. We've got a great preview ahead of you. We've got an opposition view coming. We've also got Jon Spark from Cherries Red Army. And we're, as always, going to look at those last fixtures, the season, predicted 11, presser, and your score predictions at the end. So thank you for joining us. If you join us on YouTube or Twitter, if you're one of our 8 new subscribers over the weekend after you watched our matchday vlog, the win against Bristol City, thank you for joining the channel. Really appreciate that. If you're one of our subscribers that have been with us since the start, as always, we really appreciate your support. So make sure you continue to share Cherries Red Army as we continue to grow. Also, at some point in this video, we'll really appreciate hit that like, because it helps the channel and the video grow. So make sure you do that. And of course, the chat, the interactive chat is open for you this evening. Make sure you use it. Let us know your thoughts, get involved, and let us know who's joining us right now, and even tell us where you're joining us from. So make sure you take advantage of that. If you're watching this video and you couldn't watch us live, let us know your thoughts in the comment. We'll read every single one as we prepare for this big championship fixture. Now, both of these teams kicked off. It was the opening day of the season in the championship, a thriller at Dean Court, if you remember, 2-2. And both teams probably had the same expectation to try and get promoted back to the Premier League. Well, quite a few months on now, expectations look maybe slightly different, but we're going to dive into it because the Cherries take on the Baggies tomorrow evening. Let's do it. Here we go again then in the championship. My first guest, he's part of Cherries Red Army's team all season. It's Jon Spark. How you doing, Jon?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks again for having me on, Kirk. Looking forward to previewing an interesting game tomorrow against teams whose seasons have panned out very differently than I think we all imagined.
Lots to discuss. And an opposition guest on this one. Looking forward to this. Spoke to Louis earlier on in the season. Louis, how's the season going for the podcast? We're going to get into the team season in a moment, but tell us a bit about the Baggies podcast, and thanks for joining us this evening.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on, guys. Yeah, really appreciate it. But yeah, so the podcast, of course, is a weekly thing talking all about West Bromwich Albion. We range sort of from match reaction. We do tend to do an episode every Monday, whether it be a match reaction or when we don't have a game, we tend to knock in a little special guest or maybe an ex-player if we can manage to get one on in time. And yeah, just discussing with fans and journalists about the games and everything to do with Albion, really. So yeah, it's very much fan orientated, led by myself. But yeah, we tend to have the odd special guests along the way, and it's great fun to do. Maybe not so great at the moment in terms of Albion, but yeah, it's always fun to do.
Brilliant. And Baggies podcast details are in the description below. Make sure you go and head over to their Twitter and check out the preview Louis has done. And I'm sure there'll be a podcast after the game as well. Who's currently joining us then this evening for this preview? We've got Chris Hubble. How you doing? We've got Liam. Hope you're well. Jakey up the Cherries. That's Aaron's boy. We've got Robert. Ooh, we're going up, he says. Morgan, how you doing? Great work with all the shows. No worries, Mark Cole. We've got Duncan as well. Anyone else joining us? Make sure you let us know. Duncan's joining us from West Yorkshire this evening. So we're going to dive into this fixture in a moment. But Louis, come on, tell us a little bit about West Brom then. I must admit, when we did a prediction at the start of the season, I'm convinced, John, that we put West Brom up there with Sheffield United in the final table we predicted. And that opening day was a bit of a cracker, really. Value and Ishmael didn't quite work out. And why are you where you are right now?
Yeah, that's $1 million question, really. We wish we knew. But yeah, of course, the start of the season gave me a lot of optimism. Of course, it's always going to be a bit hectic on that first day, but it really was a helter-skelter game, very end-to-end, and kind of the opposite of what we came to expect from Ishmael's football in the end, which turned out to be quite boring, quite turgid, and a lot like sort of Tony Pulis in the Premier League, from what I remember. It kind of resonated that towards the end, and yeah, things grew a bit stale. He of course, I remember he started every single game with a 3-4-3, and of course started that game at the start of the season with that, but he never ever changed formation ever in all of his time at the Hawthorns, and I think that grew to a lot of fans' frustration, my frustration, because you know, we've seen under Steve Bruce that the 3-5-2 that he's been playing could be the one to work, but Ishmael never changed his system, never changed his formation. And I think that's really what ended up getting in the sack. I think results were turning against him. He was insisting that this was the way forward when in fact it probably wasn't. Of course, at Barnsley, he did such a fantastic job last year. Kirk, we spoke about it off camera, whether it was a little bit of a fluke or not. I just think it was a bit of an underdog story, and I think that style of play works for that. But when I suppose West Brom, you're coming down from the Premier League, you're expected to have a lot of the ball. You're expected to sort of keep it, and you're expected to play some nice high quality possession football. But when your manager comes in, he wants to play long ball. He wants to sort of be dogged and run around for the ball and be the side that doesn't have the most of possession. It sort of became a bit. It wasn't really the right fit, I think. And although I was excited about what that sort of period could hold, it wasn't quite the case. But yeah, Bruce has come in now. Things seem to have actually got worse, which I'm not really sure how that's happened. But yeah, he's tried to implement a better playing style. He's tried to get the ball on the floor. But I ultimately just think the players have kind of just sort of given up on the season, I think, really. I think they're a bit scarred by what happened under Ishmael. They're really upset with themselves for being 12th in the championship. That's not where, of course, anybody expected us to be at the start of the season. And I think they're quite hurt by it. Their confidence is completely shot. And I think it's really hard to see us building any run of form towards the end of the season, let alone getting anywhere near the top six, which if you'd have said that at the start of the season, I don't think anybody would have believed us.
It's quite an amazing summary, really, and we will dive more into where you're at right now. But John, let's go back to that start and just talking about Valérien Ishmael. It was an interesting sort of managerial decision because he'd done so well at Barnsley, and I know I said this last season. Was it a bit of a freak? Did he have nothing to lose? Because his football team at Barnsley was very much gung-ho. We saw that at Dean Court. When he went to West Brom, he almost had everything to lose. And although they were pretty decent on day one against a bare Bournemouth side, if we go back that far, it clearly was a bit of a freak performance, him managing Barnsley, because he struggled to get that West Brom team going.
You could certainly argue that. I think it wasn't until maybe a couple of months into the season where I think I realised sort of where, and at that point, West Brom hadn't really fallen off, or at least in that sort of early stage, where we were doing one of our international break sort of tier lists to think how people were doing, and there was a big discussion about whether Fulham or West Brom would join us as the top two, because we were feeling very confident at the time, and I argued very strongly that Fulham would be successful and West Brom wouldn't, because Ishmael but so used to being at Barnsley, being the team that were on the back foot, were the underdogs the entire time, were capable of just hammering in his style with a team that had almost no budget in the division, where everyone was open to all of his ideas and where his word could be law and everything would work out. And now he goes to a West Brom side where he's got a lot of egos in there, I'm pretty sure, will be very confident Premier League players who don't necessarily want to be told to completely change their style of play, had previously played quite an attacking, progressive style under Jukanovic. And now he wants them to play high press, high intensity, or at least that's what he did under Barnsley, with a lot of long ball. And suddenly, that's just not going to be popular with the players in as much as it used to be under the previous management. It's not popular with the fans when things don't work out. It's quite boring because it's just long ball. It really just wasn't the right situation for him at all. He tried to make it work, and obviously you can see that the players, in the end gave up on him, and they've given up on the season, as Louis quite rightly said. And unfortunately, some managers just don't fit certain situations, and a team that's expected to dominate a division, that's just not what his style is.
No. Going into this last weekend, Louis, your fixture then was Birmingham. Now, when you look at your form over the season and where you've had good moments, you probably wish you could play every game at home, because you look okay at home. Only a couple of losses from what I've seen, and that was against Swansea and Preston, 2-0 both times. Playing on the road, though, that's probably where your problems may have come. And it was a 1-0 loss against Birmingham. And weirdly, I wasn't actually surprised, without being disrespectful.
Yes, probably a fair comment. I don't think any of us were certainly surprised, but yeah, it was just such a. I think Steve Bruce described it as the worst game of football he's ever seen, and for a manager who has managed every game that Steve Bruce has managed, that's quite a statement, I think, with the sort of football that he's pulled out at different clubs. But yeah, I don't think necessarily we deserved to lose the game. I think it was very we were just as bad as each other, I think, is probably the phrase for it. And I think that's the most worrying thing, because Birmingham aren't a great side, but both sides insisted on playing long ball, and Steve Bruce was sat on the sidelines. He's tried to basically implement a style where we do keep the ball on the floor, because I think he understands that that's what the fans and the players will resonate best with. But he was screaming for them to get the ball on the floor, and they just continued to kick it long. And I think that was one of the problems for us. We just kept playing long balls over the top. Birmingham's defence were eating it up, and there was just no fluidity in either team's style, which was the worrying thing. So yeah, of course, it was Lyle Taylor's penalty that won it. I think we should have had a penalty about 3 minutes in, but that certainly doesn't excuse the, I suppose, 87 minutes that came after that were pretty dreadful. But yeah, it was a shocking loss, and another low point in what has been a very low season for us.
I'm going to be a little bit controversial here then, John, because I'm not a big fan of Steve Bruce. Nothing personal against him, and I don't really like his football teams. And going into a game like this, and it's going to be a tough game without, again, being disrespectful. But when I look at a Steve Bruce side, I do fancy it. We're going to get stuck into more of this game. But yeah, looking at that Birmingham 1, West Brom 0, you think this is quite a nice time to play them. But we know that West Brom have got decent results this season against the likes of Fulham.
Yeah, and that's a game of recent memory where they were by far the better side on the day. And speaking of Steve Bruce, I mean, you've only got to look at his time at Newcastle. He wasn't wasn't great, but he certainly knew how to pull out a result out of the bag out of nowhere. And even if he was maybe relying on a star man here or there to pull a bit of magic out of nowhere, but because of West Brom's underperforming. I think they can certainly look at games like this, and as I think they maybe did against Fulham, as an opportunity to just show it's like, look, this is just a season. We can still perform well, and we can still beat the best team in this division, as they did, even if Fulham weren't at their best on the day. And it doesn't matter what position any team is. If you're coming up against a team that looks like they're going to go up, you're going to want to beat them more than any other side. It's just a way to show off, if nothing else, and gain additional pride. And West Brom have still got a lot of really good players, very, very good Championship players, lower tier Premier League players in their squad. And if we don't perform, there's no doubt that West Brom could easily turn us over. And as you said, their record is very good at home in terms of remaining unbeaten. So it's obviously going to be still a tough game, regardless of what kind of form West Brom are heading into.
Let's look at Bournemouth then as well then, John. And at the weekend, we got 2 wins in a row. Scott Parker, he had to watch a match from our position in the stands a few games ago because he had a suspension. And since then, we've performed a lot better than when he was by the dugout. And we're now on the front foot. I think we blew the stats away over the Championship at the weekend with XG and shots on goal and how, clinicality. We've heard that before on previous channels. And yeah, 3-2 against Bristol City. We had to hang on at the end potentially a little bit, even though we had a poor start. Take the 3 minutes away from it, 87 minutes of real good quality, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's actually quite, I say quite, it's very promising, I think, for Bournemouth fans when you look at and say that those last 2 games are arguably our best 2 performances of the season. In the 3-0 win against Huddersfield and 3-2 win against Bristol City, either side of an international break. The 3-2 scoreline is a little bit flattering on Bristol, I think, in terms of how much we created and how good we were at dominating them in almost the entirety of the match, par, one good set piece at the start and one bit of falling asleep at the back for the second. So going into this period where we are going up against a lot of very good sides, it's going to be, I think it is the toughest run-in, apart from maybe Fulham, of the entire Championship, going into these last 9 games. To say that we're going into season-defining form now, I think says a lot about how positive we can be as fans, but also a little bit about, where was this earlier in the season? We've had games where we've done well, but you look at so many of our victories have been by 1-goal margins. I think 8 of our victories have been by 1-goal margins. There've been a lot of tight games that didn't need to be because of how we tried to see out matches from positions where we could have tried to, see things off. And I think we tried to do that against Bristol City, whereas other games, particularly early in the season, we really didn't. So there's a lot of confidence flowing through the squad now, which is really encouraging. And the strength in depth is just, apart from Fulham, every opposition fan looks at the bench that we've got and gone, well, at least half of those would start for our first team. It's ridiculous the kind of presence we've got. So it's so encouraging at the moment.
Now, Louis, you said earlier on in the conversation that the season's almost gone. Mathematically, it hasn't. You probably would need to put some decent form together in the last 7. Are you looking at the likes of Bournemouth? Maybe you did in the last fixture because it's this fixture coming up, but you're looking at us, and the team and how we're playing and thinking we've got to try and stop them having these many attacks or these many attempts on goal. Because when I look at West Brom, just similar to what John said, you've had a lot of close matches. There's not a lot of thrilling games like the neutrals, the 4-3s. There's a lot of 1-0s, a lot of 1-1s, 2-0s. Could be a close game and you might only get 1 or 2 chances potentially in the match.
Yeah, absolutely. And if that's the case with the 1 or 2 chances, we're unlikely to take them as I think we're the biggest XG underperformers in the whole division. So I think that's probably a big sign. And under Ismail, we tend to keep games sort of quite tight, whether that be, as you said, like a 2-1 or a 1-0. We tend to be quite tight at the back. Under Bruce, we've had a few consecutive 2-0 losses, as you mentioned earlier. So yeah, I think it's definitely going to be a tight game. And I think we kind of have to replicate that game that we had against Fulham, because I think that's the sort of best method that we can get a result. We kind of pressed a bit high up the pitch and squeezed Fulham's sort of creative threats and made it almost a bit like what we expected Ismail's style of football to be, just without sort of the negative sort of long balls down the pitch. I think it was a lot more fluid. So yeah, I think we kind of have to replicate that to get a result against yourselves. I'm still not confident, but I think you give yourself the best chance if you replicate that performance and put in a shift like you did, because that was one of the best games I've seen from Albion this season in terms of effort, application, and I think Steve Bruce got things completely spot on in that game. I think there have been times where he's been a little outthought by the opposition manager, and that's what really worried me in that Fulham game, that he'd be outthought a bit too easily. But I didn't expect him to have that sort of game style where he essentially played what we expected Ismail's style of football to be, and yeah, it certainly paid off. But yeah, as I said, we'll have to replicate that and have to bring that back if we are to get even just a point against yourselves, and try and keep ourselves in the game by as you said, keeping the game nice and tight and within close margins.
Well, we'll get those score predictions in a bit. Nick says, it is a worry we can play that well and still concede 2 goals. But I've been saying all season, maybe just win football matches like Fulham have. How many games have Fulham won where they just conceded loads of goals? And talking of Fulham, Louis, we have got a Fulham fan joining the party in the chat this evening. He's a Fulham fan. He comes into most previews. So welcome, Wayne, checking out Fulham and Bournemouth. Talk about players on the night then for you tomorrow night, Louis. I'm looking at goal scorers that potentially could hurt Bournemouth and players we've got to try and keep out. And it all sort of leads down one road to Karlan Grant on 14 goals. I know you've got other goal scorers in your team like Andy Carroll, but not getting any sort of numbers like that. Then when you're looking at where potential assists was come from, it's Callum Robinson with 8. Yeah, are those the players to watch, or is there anyone else that is keen to watch, but we need to be aware because the stats might not tell us that?
Yeah, I think they're probably the ones that need to be watched. I think they're the highest scoring or creative partnership in the division, so their combinations have led to the most goals in the Championship so far this season. Yeah, every time one seems to assist the other. So yeah, they are pretty deadly up front when they get sort of inside that in and around that 18-yard box. But anywhere else on the pitch, I'd say they're fairly ineffective and pretty anonymous. I do think that they need an Andy Carroll alongside them to kind of beef them up a bit and give sort of a different dynamic up front, because I think they are too easily sort of missable in that front line. I think often they're kind of played around or out-muscled by defenders and the ball ends up coming straight back. So yeah, I think they're two that in terms of goal scoring and assists that well, probably the only two that need to be watched really. But certainly I think the back line is particularly strong, and I think that's always probably been our strong point this season, that back three. I don't know, obviously Ismail, as I said, didn't revert from that 3-4-3, but he's always played that back three, and I think they're so comfortable in that that's why games seem to be so tight that we play in this season. In the midfield, I think Taylor Gardner-Hickman, who's a young lad to come through the academy, made sort of a breakthrough this season. He's 20 years old. He's quite creative. He's typically a right winger, but we've been playing him in centre midfield as sort of the attacking threat in there. So yeah, I think he could be an influence. Maybe not in terms of the numbers, as you said, but definitely on the ball, he's been showing his quality and looks pretty good. And yeah, he seems to be what we're kind of resting our hopes on for the rest of the season, which I think is a little unfair on him. But yeah, in terms of goals and assists, I think Robinson or Grant is definitely where it's going to come from if they get those chances in and around that box.
John, you've heard this story before because we were in the Championship last season, and when you looked at our squad, we had a very good squad. And when you look at West Brom's squad, you think they've got a really good squad and they should be right up there, really. The players we've just spoke about, are those the ones you're worried about, or you're thinking about other players that could maybe stop us scoring and influence the game tomorrow that gives a negative result to Bournemouth?
Yeah, I mean, those are the main two in terms of Grant and Robinson. It was interesting just 5 minutes ago, just thinking about what other players they've got. And I remember, obviously, you signed Daryl DK in January, and he's been injured basically the whole of the second half of the season, which is so unfortunate because, I mean, things would have been very different if he'd been available. Absolutely monster of a player up front. Andy Carroll, even if he doesn't score very much, is a player that any defense is going to struggle to keep a hold of if he's fit. And of course, I think Bournemouth have been very good at defending set pieces this season, but West Brom do have 3 big centre halves to throw up for every set piece. And we conceded in the 4th minute to Atkinson in Bristol City, and if we put in the same kind of plan we did for that goal against West Brom, I could definitely see us conceding from a set piece. So, the certainly set pieces, I think, is one of the biggest areas we're going to have to work our socks off to defend against. But, there is still some quality in there. And I don't know how much he's been playing, but Alex Mowat was a player I really liked at Barnsley. I don't know what he's been like for West Brom this season, Louis.
Yeah, he's not been anywhere near, I think, the player that we expected. I do think he's a really good player, and technically he's shown some really good flashes. I'm sure you'll have seen a couple of the goals that he's decided to score earlier on in the season. But yeah, in terms of kind of off the ball, he's been really lacking. But yeah, I think we do see a few flashes of it. I think he's just got sucked into kind of this culture, but that they've kind of all sort of given up on the season, and that's a shame because I would have liked to have seen more of him this season. But yeah, a little bit disappointing, to be honest, John. I'd have hoped for better from him, and he was really good in that first game of the season. Of course, I think that was probably one of his best games.
No, I did really rate Alex Mowatt, and I think when you signed him, I thought another player there that was about and available. Looking at Bournemouth for you then, Louis, I mean, what players are you worried about tomorrow night?
Uh, there's quite a few. The fact that Todd Cantwell was on, I remember looking. He's been on your bench the past few games, and that's ridiculous because as I'm sure John alluded to earlier, he's one of those players that would be the sort of player that we would really need in our side, a bit of a creative threat. But that midfield three, I remember mentioning that on my preview. That is the best midfield three in the league by far, with Cook, Lerma, and Philip Billing. Philip Billing, of course, in playing in that more advanced role that I didn't think he could play. I think remember seeing him early in the season. I think he grabbed a goal as well. Yeah, he's a real threat. But of course, Solanke up front, it'd be silly not to mention him. And I've liked the look of Anthony on the wing as well. He's been a real rise, and I suppose there's loads of them, like a list, but Zamora at left back as well has been pretty decent as well. Considering you signed him after he got released from like Charlton or somebody like that, was it? Yeah, he's been very good. But yeah, they're just all over the park. It's just such a complete team, and as you said earlier, the depth you've got in is spectacular. But yeah, there's plenty of players I think we need to watch out for. It's very similar to that Fulham sort of squad with the depth and the quality in each and every position. But yeah, lots of players to be worried about for us, I think.
Let's look at that team that last played for you then. Just want you to sort of tell us if this what you think it's probably going to look like tomorrow night. That's the team that you'll see that took on Birmingham. I mean, how much would it look like potentially tomorrow? Are you expecting a very similar lineup?
Yeah, I think in terms of the back line, I think it'd be relatively similar. I'd like to see Dara O'Shea maybe given a go instead of Carl Bartley. I think O'Shea's sort of warranted a start. I remember he played very well against yourselves earlier in the season, of course, grabbed the goal as well. But yeah, I think he's one of those battling centre halves that I think we just need in the side. I think Bartley's kind of been out of sorts recently, so I think maybe it's time to give him a go. He's a player that a lot of the fans like, and I think he could be a really good influence. Other than that, I think that's probably what we might go for. I think maybe Robinson might switch out for Andy Carroll, as I said, to give us a bit of a different dynamic up front and give us something else for you to sort of deal with in that back line, because as I said, Robinson and Grant are very similar players and have very little effect in terms of build-up play. Yeah, in the midfield, I'd maybe like to see Grady Dean Garner, because he came on against Birmingham City and he played in sort of the number 10 role, which I thought was quite nice, and I thought that's maybe a role that he could be tried in. So maybe if he came in for Mowat, that might be a little bit of an idea that could work, and he can sort of float over to each channels as and when, and kind of have a bit of a freer responsibility in comparison with the other midfielders. But yeah, I think maybe I'd like to see Dean Garner come in, and O'Shea and Andy Carroll as well. But otherwise, I think that we'll stick to a pretty similar team.
John, it was an end-to-end thriller at the start of the season. This looks like a back three that could turn into a back five at some points in the game. This is going to be a different match, do you think, tomorrow night?
Oh yeah, I very much think so. I think back in that game, we very much picked a point up against the run of play. There was all the sort of run of the match, as it were. There was a goal that was disallowed for a foul against Mark Travers that was never a foul on him. So we almost stole a point thanks to the referee in that game. But that was sort of the story of our start, sort of first third of the season. Didn't necessarily be outstanding, but was very, very clinical. The two chances that we scored from were two of our very few chances that day, and we were sort of on the back ropes for large parts, and defended relatively well, and turned out to be defense was one of our strengths this season. So, in that game, West Brom were on the front foot for the majority of it. I think it will probably be the exact opposite story this time round. It's not as though West Brom can't dominate the ball with some of the technical players they've got. I just think Bournemouth have got so much momentum and ability in midfield, with the likes of Lewis Cook being being the metronome for us, and with players like Adam Smith and Zamora bombing on and supporting from out wide. So many technical players in the middle that I think we're capable of dominating even a team as good as West Brom on the ball with the confidence that we've got. But we have struggled against back threes in the past. We did break down quite well Bristol City in the most recent game. But having said that, Bristol City's story of their seasons, they score a lot, but they also concede a lot. They've got the third worst defense in the division, I believe. So should be a bit of a different story against this one, and with with an organised defence. We won't find it as easy to get through them as we did Bristol City. Just a question for Louis about some of the players, because you mentioned before with regards to you being an underperforming XG side, and I think underperforming is probably quite a word for a number of the players in the league, not just more recently when you've sort of all decided to get your parasols out in February, but Dean Garner is a name that a lot of people expected a lot more from this season. And just looking at that, at the squad, a player we haven't mentioned yet is Sam Johnston, who obviously, still in the frame for an England call-up if a few injuries happen, despite the fact that, every other week on a highlights program, I feel as though he's made a mistake. It's been a really odd one to see someone that's so highly rated and performed so brilliantly in the Premier League just seemingly completely drop off a cliff in the Championship. What have you made of Johnson and Dean Garner this season?
Yeah, Dean Garner, I think you just like that season we had with Bilic. I think you have to kind of remember the sort of players that he was playing with. Of course, he had Pereira in there. And this season, he's kind of been relied upon as our main creative force. And of course, teams see that. They see Dean Garner. They see the double figures that he got in assists in that season a couple of years ago. And they think, right, you're the main creative threat. Let's all mark you. And there's not really a Pereira to kind of sort of balance that out, or maybe a Krovinovic who he had as well that season. And it's sort of the emphasis had been thrust upon him to kind of be that main threat and sort of create all those chances, whereas there's no Pereira in the side to kind of balance it out, maybe draw some men away from him, create some more space. And it seems like every time he gets the ball, there's three players on him, and he can't work it out because they know that we're going to look to play the ball into him. And every time he gets the ball, he tries a skill move, he gets tackled, and his confidence every time that happens just drains. So yeah, he's a player that I really, really want to succeed because, he just comes across as a lovely lad. I know that's nothing really to do with the football. He just comes across as a really likeable person and you want him to succeed. Yeah, with Johnston, his concentration is really lacking. I think that happened when we were actually last in the Championship with Bilic, and certainly the season before when we were sort of fighting around the promotion playoffs and lost in the semi-finals to Aston Villa. It's when in the Premier League he really shone because, let's be fair, our defence was absolutely awful. There were shots coming at him every 5 minutes or so, and he was on it all he was on it all through the game. He was picking up the ball. He was making 5 or 6 game saving dives every single game, and that's a ridiculous amount for a Premier League goalkeeper. And he was constantly on it. In the Championship, we've seen sort of a wavering concentration because we've had a bit more of the ball. Down the other side of the pitch, it's been kind of in our territory. We've had the ball a lot and we've kind of gone forward with it. We've had the main attacking emphasis in comparison to lots of sides. And all of a sudden, a team makes one counter attack and he's not ready for it. And all of a sudden the ball's in the back of the net and stuff like that. There's been quite a few errors. I think the one I feel like there's a couple that you're alluding to, which is one that's one against Derby, which he got a mix up with Kipre, and there's the one against Huddersfield where he just kicked the ball into Danny Ward. I really don't know what he was thinking there, but there's just been too many errors for him. I think he definitely is in the frame for a World Cup call-up, and he is certainly going to leave this summer with him being out of contract. So I expect him to go back to the Premier League. Not sure who that's with yet, but yeah, I can't see any Premier League teams, if they really have a deep dive into his performances this season, wanting to take him on as a first choice keeper. I can just see him sitting on the bench somewhere, which might not be good for his England career. But no, it's not been a good season for him so far. Definitely not.
Right, Louis, it's been great to have you on. Make sure you head over to Baggies podcast and check out Louis' preview, and also check him out after the game as well. But it is a big game in the Championship tomorrow. You're not completely written off yet. What's your score prediction tomorrow?
I said 1-1 on the preview, so I'll stick with that. I think I'll stick with that. I think we'll get an early goal, but I think we'll soon come crashing down to earth as soon as we realise that it's going to be a hard task to maintain that scoreline. So I'll go with 1-1. I think we'll get an early goal. I'll say a set piece goal, as John alluded to earlier. I'll go for Dara O'Shea to score again if he gets a start. I think that'll be nice for him. But yeah, I think it's going to be a very difficult game. But yeah, I'll go for 1-1. If feeling a little bit positive because we've got no expectations and our parasols are up and we're ready for the summer. But yeah, I'll go for 1-1.
Brilliant. It's been great to have you on. After tomorrow, we wish you all the best for the rest of the season, Louis. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys. Appreciate it. Take care.
Fantastic. We will continue with this preview, though. So we've got lots more to come. We've got the presser, we've got the predicted 11 and your score predictions. And Steve Hensman, he might just be Parker-ing, he's backstage. He wants to talk about that Bristol City win at the weekend. So make sure you stay with us. But thanks to Louis, we're going to continue with this preview. Thanks to Louis there. We got Steve Hensman. That was a lot better at the weekend again, wasn't it, Steve? How you doing?
Yeah, I'm very well, mate. How are you guys doing?
Not too bad. Come on. You were very happy at the weekend after that game. You're like, this is all I've been waiting for. I've got nothing against Scott Parker. I just want to get my money's worth, and I definitely am getting my money's worth the last couple of games.
Yeah, the game, I think you've alluded to it already today on the podcast, but that take out the first 5 minutes, the last 5 minutes, and we dominated that game so well. I mean, some of the players are back to their best, the likes of Lewis, Kirk. You wouldn't know that Jeff's been halfway around the world, comes back and puts in another great shift. All around the pitch, I think we just really, really good displays. I can't pick out one player that had a really poor game, and usually you can pick out 2 or 3. And like you said, I'd never wanted Scott Parker to fail. I just, we just kept seeing the same repetitive sort of stuff regurgitated on the pitch. And unfortunately, there was no inklings of it changing ever so slightly. There was never sort of, we've made a step here or a step there and it's in the right direction. It just seemed to be the same repetitive stuff. But the last 2 or 3 games that we've played, we've seen a lot more freedom. We've seen some of these passages of play. He always talks about that perfect moment. Well, those perfect moments seem to be presenting themselves as really good opportunities a lot more often than they were. So maybe it was just a case of, I said this on Saturday, maybe it was just a case of his philosophy is just taking a little bit of time to bed in with this team. And there's a lot of new faces there. And it's just about starting to come to fruition. I mean, what a good time. I think, John just mentioned it. What a good time if this is to come into some really good form and, the philosophy starts working, clicking.
Definitely. John, let's just go back to that Bristol City game again, because I know you love a stat, just like me. I do love a stat as well. And when you look at the orange there on the screen, that's the Bournemouth shots last weekend versus Bristol City. And that was meant to be against a team that we're going to struggle against and a low block.
Yeah. I mentioned it in the preview for that game. I said, it wouldn't surprise me if we struggled and sort of managed to drag our way through to a 1-1 draw. But, that was our, certainly statistically, but even by the eye, that was our most impressive attacking display of the season. And you can even, despite scoring 3 good goals, you can still probably remember a further 3 really good chances that we somehow didn't stick away. And, we've got players like Ryan Christie, who somehow still is only on about 2 goals this season. Is it 2? Despite having about 3
it's a mystery,
chances in that one game. So
he'll rip up the Prem, don't worry.
Yeah, he better. It was really, really pleasing to see. And I wasn't there, but certainly the stories that come back from the game were just how positive the crowd were, despite going down early. And after, 30, 35 minutes, I was watching the game and just thinking, we'll score any moment now. I mean, this looks so good
Yeah.
in comparison to how we've been. And Bristol City helped us. There's no doubt about that. Particularly the goalkeeper, I think, did certainly drop the ball almost literally for the first goal and somewhat for the second. But yeah, very, very, very promising. And if we keep that up, I really do feel as though we can be looking, maybe shrinking the gap between us and Fulham a little bit, which is not what I was thinking 2 months ago.
I think that's quite a good, when you say about the crowd not getting on their back straight away, John, I think that was purely because you could see there was passages of play just before they scored where we were really, really threatening. And it was really nice. It was almost champagne football, little flicks and give and goes. And we never relented with that. And it always looked like like you said, it looked like we were going to score. Whereas previously, when we've had those low block sides, we've really just sort of been backwards, forwards, down the sides. And it's all looked a bit, like we've said before, rehearsed. And that was the difference for me on Saturday. It looked like we had intent, not saying it was a plan as such, but it just looked, there was freedom and they were expressing themselves and things were working. And that's what we haven't seen against those low block sides.
Agree. Now, we're not always lucky enough to get a presser out of Scott Parker for midweek games, but we did get one this midweek, and that's probably because Bournemouth are on top of the world, shall we say. And he gave his press conference this afternoon or yesterday, and he spoke about those injuries still being injuries. Junior Stanislas is currently working his way through the pain. Kiefer Moore is out of that boot and still continuing to progress to fitness. Robbie Brady's on the turf, and he was asked, Steve, about whether squad rotation would be required for the last 9 games, because it's very easy to keep a consistent side, isn't it? It's very easy to keep playing the same team. They've won the last 2 games, they've gelled, but we're going to come to it in a bit when we do the predicted 11, because you know that I'm trying to get a player in this team. I love how we played the other day. I love that we're scoring goals, but it's eking away at me that there's someone sitting on the bench, not just sitting on the bench for 60, 70 minutes. He sat on the bench for 90 minutes. But before we go down that road, Steve, I want you to talk to me about this player that you've already mentioned, because if he is going to squad rotate, there are going to be players that are going to stop him doing a squad rotation. And that's the likes of Lewis Cook, who's got a double trophy there for man the matches. Amazing that Dom Solanke scored 24. Dom Solanke scored 24 league goals this season and hasn't got one player of the month. Lewis Cook picking up all the trophies at the moment. And this man is going to be a problem if he's going to try and squad rotate potentially.
It's a nice problem to have because he's doing so bloody well. I mean, it's no coincidence that his upturn in form has coincided with our changing fortunes to some degree. But talking about squad rotation, I think it's unavoidable. I think you're going to have to, just purely for the fixture schedules. You're not good. In an ideal world, my personal opinion would be you don't mess with a winning formula. I said that last year when we went on that run, and then Woodgate changed it around for the Wickham game, and it all went to pot. I think if you've got that momentum with those players, keep it going. But I just don't see how it's viable in this run-in with games every Tuesday, Saturday, Tuesdays. Players will not recover as well as others. Some players won't. The likes of Jeff's just been halfway around the world, for example. And we've got a good squad. There's no doubt in that. Like we were talking of, obviously we had a little chat earlier, but we were talking about the likes of Todd Cantwell. What a great player, and he's sat on our bench at the moment. I just, you're going to have to bring the likes of him in. Dembele's quite an obvious one for Anthony if needed. I mean, we've got players in every position, so we're blessed in that regard. But yeah, it's picking it. I think it's just this is where Scott's going to have to really pick his times to use them and how much he does rotate, how many he brings in and out, because I think you don't want to disrupt it too much.
Yeah, we are 1 minute away from going into that predicted 11. We're going to need your help in the chat to help us. And John, before we go into that predicted 11, I don't want you to tell me who you're starting and not starting yet. But when you look that potentially we will need a squad rotation, I actually think it may need to happen tomorrow. The question mark that might go in the back of Scott Parker's head is, does he keep the same team tomorrow and potentially roll the dice at Sheffield United? Because if we pick up 3 points tomorrow and we get a draw at Sheffield United, happy days. Or does he roll the dice tomorrow, lose, and that makes Sheffield United an even bigger game?
That's a good question. I think you've got to look at the fact that it's 2 away games in a row within the space of 4 days, and it's late on Wednesday and then it's early on Saturday. So there are players that you'd certainly look at the likes of Jefferson Lerma and say, can he necessarily keep it going for the time that he's done after his long period, his late trip back from Colombia. And then there's others that you feel as though are more important, that maybe, is it right to rest them? Do we have necessarily like replacements for some of these players? How much is it going to impact how well we're playing if I make too many changes? It's a really, really tough one. And I think I would agree that it's probably better to try and focus on just getting 3 points, if possible, against West Brom. And then, particularly with Sheffield United maybe being a little bit out of sorts at the moment, thanks to the fact they've got so many injuries, that one is a little bit more, there's less expectation going into away at Sheffield United, I feel, and we can maybe play to that. But yeah, it's a really difficult one, because the fact is, in most situations, what I prefer to do is play your best players for the big games and then rest a few and change a little bit up for some of the maybe not so big games. The problem is
they're all big games
now. They are all of them. West Brom, Sheffield United, Middlesbrough, Coventry, Fulham, Swansea is the first one you can start resting maybe, Blackburn, Nottingham Forest, and then Millwall, who are also fighting for play. Like every single one of them is top 10, top 12, fighting for playoff places. None of those are small games, apart from maybe Swansea. So it's really, really tough, and this is where he will earn his salt, no doubt.
Right, it's time to put the cardigan on, guys, because we got to do that Scott Parker predicted 11 for tomorrow's game. Going to need your help in the chat. Should we do it? Here we go then for this game versus West Brom. In goal, obviously, it is the very, very good goalkeeper we have at the moment, Mark Travers, being compared to Aaron Ramsdale on Twitter yesterday. Well done to Aaron Ramsdale, actually. 100 Premier League appearances. Just thought I'd put that in there. Let's go into that back four. And a personal request from Steve earlier on was to make sure that Lloyd Kelly captain starts in that back four. Isn't that right, Steve? So it's
you massive liar.
We know he's going to start. He's the captain of the club. Right, John, I'm going to give you the back four today. Want to know who you're going to play left back alongside Kelly. We've got the likes of Mepham and Cahill that are looking for a game potentially. Smith likes a match at West Brom. He scored there before at the Hawthorns, but Jack Stacey's not been bad this season, and you never know. Ethan Laird might be even in Bournemouth today. So who are you going to play in that back four?
Who was that third one?
Ethan Laird. If you haven't heard of him, we signed him in January. He was one of the best fullbacks in the championship.
It really doesn't ring a bell, Kirk, at all. But I'm sure he's there somewhere. I'm sure he's there somewhere. Yes. So it is interesting with this one, because I think Phillips is the easy one at centre back. I think he'll definitely play. I don't have any doubts about that. The interesting is, you could easily change the left back and the right back. I think Davis is one of those players that's been very unfortunate to not get more game time this season. And if you're going to try and do a little bit of changes here and there, I feel as though Zamora's playing far more than he would ever expect it to, and maybe is more than necessarily his body is going to be able to do for the remainder of this season, given what he's played in the 9 games that we've got remaining. But I think we'll probably see Zamora play. I doubt that. And again, Smith, coming back from injury, is he necessarily capable of playing 90 minutes so many times in quick succession?
So what's
I'm quite a fan. I'm a fan of Stacey, so I wouldn't have any issues with Stacey coming in. But having said that, if I'm going to predict what Parker is going to do, I have a feeling it's going to be an unchanged back four.
An unchanged back four. So you're expecting a Smith, a Phillips, and a Jay-Z, Jordan Zamora. Okay, let's move up the pitch then. Lewis Cook picking up those awards recently, and Steve, coming to you. Now, there is scope to move this around a bit. I don't expect to see Billing and Cantwell play together, especially on the road. You've mentioned Jeff Lerma may need a rest, but he seems to be a machine and he's had enough rest this season with suspensions. Now, I think Lerma will go in there, and it's up to you whether you want to go with that. And I would play Todd Cantwell tomorrow night. That's got nothing against Billing. Top assist maker. Been absolutely fantastic this season. But on their day, they're both as good as each other. And I think we've got a big game tomorrow and a big game Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, I personally agree with you. I'd leave Lerma in there. Personally, I wouldn't change the team at all. I just think they've just had an international break. I know Lerma's been overseas, but like you said, he is a bit of a machine. And I'm always a bit of an advocate for getting your noses in front and then sort of bringing on players to sort of give others a rest. But I would go with Lerma. The other one's up for debate for me, but again, it's what if you ask me what Scott Parker's going to do, it's going to be Billing, I would suggest, because he seems to go to him every time. But for me, I would happily have Cantwell or Billing in there, to be honest. But I'm going to go with Billing because I think that's what Scott will do.
Okay, let's stick Billing in there. And as we go up to the top three, Dom Solanke, he scored again. Ryan Christie was very, very positive at the weekend. Should have definitely had a go. I expect him to start. And then there's a key position, John. And let us know in the chat. I think it'll either be Dembele or Anthony. Do you agree, John? And if so, should we put that in the chat to see what the chat thinks?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's definitely going to be Dembele or Anthony. Although, you could put Lowe in there. I think Parker has shown that he'd prefer to play him off the right or coming on late as a second striker. So, yep, I agree. I think it probably will be either Anthony or Dembele. I'd be interested to see what chat thinks. I personally would say that I agree with Steve. And that I think it will be an unchanged side, but
let's put it in the chat then. You've got 1 minute, and that is for either Dembele, who scored at the weekend, or Jaden Anthony, who's had a fantastic season. Who would you play the left side of that front three tomorrow? So Jaden Anthony or Dembele, put your opinion in the chat. As that's going in then, John, let's come back to the Todd Cantwell and Philip Billing. It's eking away at me, John. I get Billing being in there. I get you can't play them together. Lewis Cook's caused the problem that you can't not play Lerma, but Lerma has to play more forward. The problem I've got, John, is we were 3-1 up at the weekend and we were playing very well. And I don't understand why Billing didn't come off for Cantwell, a player that's just as good as him with fresh engine and complete 100% fitness, keep the ball and maybe we wouldn't have conceded a second goal. But this is a player we could potentially buy next season in the Premier League if we get promoted. But if he don't get much game time between now and then, why would he sign? Although I get that I love Billing and he's been a great player.
Well, Cantwell will get his game time in the remainder of the season, and I think it is just unfortunate that you do have. Well, I say unfortunate. At the moment, it very much is. Only that left side of number 8 that really is free because Cook and Lerma have nailed down the other two spots. So you've either got Billing or Cantwell. Having said that, as we did when Lerma was suspended earlier on, you can still play Billing and Cantwell together. There's nothing to say you couldn't. And in the case that Lewis Cook is a player that. It's funny actually. I was watching a Tifo football video I think it was yesterday morning on Pirlo and his description as the metronome, and I just thought that is just exactly what we've got with Lewis Cook at the moment. The way that he can play the game at the moment, Cook, is he doesn't really need to put much effort into how he does. He does occasionally take the ball and sprint forward and dribble with it nice and really, really well break the line. But he can just take the ball, turn on a sixpence and pass it to someone else. And he barely needs to move from the middle of the pitch the way that he can shift it. That's not really how he plays. He's a lot more proactive than that. He does shift well. And obviously he's important in defending. But you can still put Lerma in that number 6 role and give Lewis Cook a rest. And in that moment, who you're going to put into that right number 8 spot, and that's the first person straight in there is Cantwell. So with the rotation that will inevitably happen, and if he doesn't, I feel as though he could regret it because injuries can easily pile up. Cantwell will get his game time. I just think that when you consider, and as I think Steve, as you mentioned, you prefer just get ahead and then you can make your changes. As the case is now, we win our next 3 games, we're basically up.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
We win 3 games, we maybe need 1 or 2 more points, and we're up. Not mathematically, but realistically. So we go all out to win the next couple games. Change everything around as much as you like, because we'll basically be on the beach at that point, and we'll be up without much issue. So it's not to say that Camwell wouldn't feature in our best 11. Just at the moment, you take form over anything else, and why mess with anything that isn't when it's not broken?
I mean, there is an option to play him on the left as well.
I mean, I said that a few weeks ago. But
if you're trying to shoehorn him in somewhere,
yeah, absolutely. I don't think that Scott Parker's going to buy into that.
No.
That was an option a few weeks ago. I think he likes that natural width and that national partnership. But guess what, guys? A decision's been made. I've looked at the chat. We have got a player that's going to fill that predicted 11. We've locked it in. Jaden Anthony. He's got that position. So it's pretty much unchanged again for this game. And like John said, get the win, and we're another step closer to promotion. That's our predicted 11 for this game. If you weren't able to join us live, do you agree, disagree? Let us know in the comments. But we've got your score predictions coming, and we'll also check out what's happening in the rest of the championship this midweek. Make sure you hit that like button then for Cherries Red Army. I don't know how many likes we're on. Let us know in the chat. Let's see if we can get to something like 40 or 50. So make sure you hit that like button, and also subscribe. If you're new to the channel, checking this preview out for the first time, subscribers, we're getting very, very close to 900, about 19 subscribers away. Also, a big shout out at this stage for our channel supporter members who currently help us deliver these streams through making donations. And that is Mike, Mark, Rich, Richard, Sammy, Steve, Paul, Neil, Aaron, Morgan, and Roy. You can become a channel supporter member or donate to the channel. You just simply go to buymeacoffee.com/Cherries Red Army. Really appreciate it. Help us with our growth. Now, the head-to-heads, guys, are pretty split. 2 wins, 2 draws, 2 losses for both teams in the last 6. And we want to get your score predictions for this game then. This is your opportunity. You've got a minute. Put those score predictions in the chat. We'll come to those in a minute, and we'll also get John's and Steve. But first of all, guys, what's happening in the rest of the championship? Because there are games this evening.
Not a lot's happening. Sheffield United are winning.
There we go. So on the screen, it's Millwall 0, Swansea 0 as they go into half-time. Peterborough 0, Luton 0, Preston 0, Blackpool 0, Sheffield United 1, QPR again losing 0, Reading 1, Stoke City 0. Fixtures tomorrow night, you've got Middlesbrough versus Fulham, Forest take on Coventry City, and West Brom versus Bournemouth. So that's going on in the rest of the championship. Guys, are you really taking notice of any other games in the championship, or just get the wins for Bournemouth and we're up? Who cares? Steve?
Well, I'm almost always looking at Sheffield United because I've got a little bit of money on Sheffield United at the moment after putting them a few months back, and because they've been sort of dying away a little bit, I'm worrying about my cash out. But then beating QPR is good news for me, and they need it because they're in real trouble of not making it. The other interesting one is Reading beating Stoke, because that 3 points may just seal the fate of the other 3 relegated sides, because Reading don't need that many more points to be safe, I think. So everything, mind you, those are the only 2 games that have got any goals in, so who cares?
Yeah, well, I said quite a while ago Blackburn wouldn't make the playoffs because they don't have the squad. I said QPR had Warburton. And are you watching any of the other championship teams, or are you just focusing on Bournemouth, Steve?
Not really, no. do you know what? I never have been. I've never been a massive. I keep one eye on, sort of see what's going on, but I'm not really following anyone, to be honest. It's only really this time of the season I get any sort of interest in it, when it's sort of in and around us. It's usually historically a relegation battle with us, but so those are the teams I'd look out for.
Yeah.
Right. Other interesting news: Sam Vokes has scored. So for Wickham. He's got a goal tonight.
Let's get those score predictions then. It's been great to have everyone join us on this match preview for West Brom. We've got Jacob the Cherries going for a clean sheet. AFC Bournemouth 2, West Bromwich Albion 0. Mark Cole's also matching that scoreline with a 2-0. Clean sheets in there, guys. Cameron's going for a 1-0. Chris is very confident. He's going for 5-0. 2-1 to the Cherries. Sean's also feeling this as well. 2-1 to the Cherries. Judging by West Brom's Twitter, it will be 4-0 to us, says Heather. Any more score predictions, bring them into the chat because I'm going to John. And John, big game tomorrow. I'll take a draw all day long. I'm putting my score prediction straight in. 1-1. Although, because I've said I don't fancy a Steve Bruce side, it wouldn't surprise me if we beat them 2-1. But I'm going for 1-1. Take that all day long. John?
Yes, I'm actually feeling quite confident. But then I think one of the few times that I've really come into a prediction and gone like, yeah, I think we'll do really well, and we've then gone to be either draw or lose, probably both times. Yeah, I think it's an interesting one because we don't necessarily know what West Brom are going to turn up. In terms of if it's the West Brom that played Fulham, we'll have a really hard go of things. But if it's the West Brom that's played 90% of the last couple months worth of games, then we could be in for a really good night. And I think that with the kind of situation West Brom are in and the confidence of the players, they will want to do well against us, but I don't think they're necessarily capable of it at the moment. And I think I'm going to go for the very famous win of a 3-1, famous Cherries Red Army 3-1 victory. I just think that we've scored 3 goals last 2 games. One of those was against a weaker side in Bristol. The other one was against a very good side in Huddersfield, who are right up there. And I think we can keep doing that. We've got the kind of momentum. If we don't change the team, 3 games in a row, same team, same score, the same amount of goals scored, I think West Brom probably will score, which is why I'm going for 3-1. But I think we are going to be, I think it's going to be a very successful midweek for us.
Steve, at the weekend, you said to me, Wednesday, more of the same. Is it more of the same tomorrow night?
Well, I definitely hope so. But I'm kind of in your camp with this one a little bit. I'd be happy with the draw. Saying that, we've got all the attributes to do exactly what John said, and the way we're playing to get another 3 goals against away from home, it's totally in our locker to do that. Equally, like John said, depends what West Brom turns up. I mean, personally, if it was me with some of the aerial prowess they've got in their team, if I was Steve Bruce, I'd just be saying aerial bombard us, because that to me would be our Achilles heel, as it proved on Saturday for the first goal. My feelings about Lloyd Kelly and heading the ball. So, that would be my plan of attack for them. And I think they've still got an outside chance, whilst it's probably a long shot, but they still might as well go for it, hadn't they? So I'd be happy if we got out there with a draw. But I mean, the other thing is, if they do come at us, that could play into our hands equally, and we could hit them on the counter attack and pick them apart. Holes will appear. It's a really tight one for me. But I think a draw, I'll be happy. I'm going for a Desmond 2-2.
2-2, nice. Yeah. But the confidence is flowing through the Cherries fans again, which is good to see. So thanks for joining us on this preview. We have got more content, obviously, coming your way between now and the end of the season. We might get a reaction from Mr. Hensman after tomorrow night's game. So make sure you hit that notification bell.
Depends how drunk I am.
We'll drop a video, hopefully, probably Thursday, if we get something from Steve. Then we are doing a Sheffield United preview on Friday night. That is likely to be 8 o'clock. So make sure you join for that, because that is a big one. And we're going up to Sheffield United on Cherries Red Army. There's going to be an away day vlog. It's back in Yorkshire. We only seem to go to Yorkshire, Cherries Red Army. So we're going for the Sheffield United on Saturday. John, I think you're going to Sheffield United as well. Can you hear me, John?
Yep. I'm certainly planning on going. I still actually need to get my ticket, but I don't think I doubt it'll have been sold out on a Saturday lunchtime kickoff. But
I think so.
I certainly plan on going there, getting to as many away games as I can before the end of the season.
And of course, Steve, you're going tomorrow and Saturday, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm booked up for the rest of the season now. So yeah.
Absolutely. You couldn't be
Well,
even
apart from
further
Blackpool,
away
because
from being plastic, Steve.
I'll go for PVC. Is that no, that's not some sort of hybrid.
Definitely. But thanks, Jon, for joining me on this match preview. It's been fun. It's been great to have Louis on as well from the Baggies podcast. And it's another preview on Cherries Red Army. Cheers, Jon.
No problem. Thanks for having me on again. And yeah, look forward to seeing people on Saturday, but hopefully a great result coming to us tomorrow.
Brilliant. And Steve, thanks for jumping on the second half. As always,
No
a
worries.
good cameo performance. So, yeah, have a safe trip tomorrow. But thanks for joining us on Cherries Red Army.
Yeah, we'll do. I'll see you
And
soon,
of course,
boys.
thank you to you, the fans that's joined us on this match preview. As always, hit that like button. Let's just make sure I do something. It's my outro. Steve Hensman on mute. Check. Thanks for joining us on this match preview. Thanks for Louis from the Baggies podcast. Thanks to Jon. Thanks to Steve. Thanks to you, the fans. If you weren't able to watch this video live, let us know your thoughts in the comments and put your score prediction in there. But Bournemouth travel up north, probably there already, to be fair. But we're an 8 o'clock kickoff tomorrow in the Championship. And the Cherries are looking to baggy another 3 points. See you on the next video. Up the Cherries.